What is going on, guys, and welcome back to Touchdowns to Home Runs. My name is Bernie. Thank you for joining us today on the Touchdowns to Home Runs show. Hope that your day is going absolutely fantastic. We're officially in the postseason for this college basketball season, which means it's time to start looking at the conference tournament brackets. So today we're going to be taking a look, breaking down. I'll be giving you my predictions for this year's Big 10 conference tournament bracket that was finalized just a few days ago. The Big 10 has had a phenomenal season. They're the deepest conference in college basketball, in my opinion, right up there with the Big 12. So I'm really excited to see how this ends up playing out with the championship game just before Selection Sunday and then working our way into the March Madness. So we'll break the bracket down in just a second. I'll also give you my predictions, but first, let's take a look at the seedings in the brackets. Teams with 2 byes. We got Michigan, who is the number 1 seed in the Big 10. They clinched that with their win last week on Thursday over Michigan State. We got Illinois, who is the team of the week last week with wins over Michigan and Ohio State. They find themselves number 2. Luka Garza and Iowa find themselves number 3, and then we got Purdue after a very sneaky season in the Big 10. They find themselves number 4. So these teams will have 2 byes. Now the teams that will start on Thursday with only 1 bye, we got Ohio State number 5. Phenomenal season when you look at it as a whole, but really struggled in the back end of the season. You got Wisconsin at number 6, Rutgers number 7. You got that 8-9 matchup between Maryland and Michigan State. And then you got Indiana coming in at number 10. And then the teams that will have to play right on day 1, starting actually tomorrow. We got Minnesota at 13, Northwestern at number 12, Nebraska at 14, and Penn State at number 11. Let's start with that first matchup of Minnesota and Northwestern. We'll start with the higher seeded Northwestern, and they really started the season off phenomenally. They started like 6-0, I think, and people were thinking that maybe they were turning around their basketball program really similar to the way that they turned around their football program in this past college football season. But again, really struggled in the back end of the season. They do have 4 double-digit scorers, so they can score the basketball, but really struggled defensively. They're led by Chase Odege. Their top scorer, just over 12.5 points per game. I think that Northwestern could get hot, but I wouldn't count them to really win more than 1 game in this tournament. Even 2, I would really be surprised, but keep an eye out for them. And then on the flip side of the matchup, we have another really interesting team in the Minnesota Golden Gophers, a team who also started the season off really well, was ranked for a portion of the season, was phenomenal at home for a large portion of the season, but really, really struggled on the road. And even just saying it that way is an understatement. And obviously now playing only neutral site games here on out, they don't have that same advantage. So I'm really interested to see what Minnesota can do. But they're a talented team as well. They have a lot of talented players. You look at Marcus Carr, one of the best guards in the country, at least in the Big 10, just under 20 points per game. Liam Robbins, their center as well. They get some great play from both their guards and bigger men as well. And I actually really do like this Minnesota team. They've just struggled anywhere away from home. So I'm really curious to see if Minnesota figures it out here. My prediction for this matchup would be Minnesota to win, but I'll be really curious to see how they do in the second or potentially even third matchups if they can pull off an upset. So give me Minnesota there. And then moving on to the second matchup on that Wednesday, Nebraska versus Penn State. We'll take a look at Nebraska first, led by Teddy Allen, their guard with 16.5 points per game. Their top 3 scorers, according to ESPN, all listed at guards. They ended the Big 10 season last in the Big 10 with a record of 7-9. They can score the basketball, but it really comes from just a few guys. They're not so tremendously defensively, but they can absolutely beat Penn State in this matchup. But really similar to Northwestern, I wouldn't see them winning more than 1 game as opposed to Minnesota, where I could potentially see them upsetting. On the flip side of that matchup, we got Penn State, finished the season with the record of 10-13. And for a large portion of the season, people were like, is this going to be the last Big 10 team who sort of sneaks into the March Madness? I don't think they will. But led by Jones, Brockington, they've got really good guard play. But they have some good bigger men as well. Listed as forwards, they got 3 double-digit scorers. Penn State has struggled, though, at times this season. They've also looked quite decent at times this season. So again, we'll have to see which Penn State team shows up. They shoot the three ball fairly decently. Their percentages are all pretty good. So let's see if Penn State can get hot, I guess. In terms of predicting this matchup, I like Penn State here. Not so much as what I like about Penn State. It's more what I don't like about Nebraska. So give me Penn State to move on. So then next up, we would be on the Thursday matchups now, that 8-9 matchup between Maryland and Michigan State. And we actually saw this matchup not too long ago in what was a big game for both of these teams. I think it was in Maryland, and Maryland ended up taking that one. But when you look at a team like Michigan State, the lower seed in this matchup, Michigan State's been playing some great basketball lately, but they have some really talented players. This is definitely one of the more talented teams in this bottom tier of the Big Ten. You look at Aaron Henry, a guy who's averaging 15.5 points per game, where even though you would have thought he probably would have averaged more this season because he has struggled at times this season, you look at some players in the Big Ten who can really take over important basketball games. Aaron Henry is that guy. I would not be surprised if you see Aaron Henry in a big game all of a sudden put up 25 points, shoot the lights out of the basketball. He is that type of guy. And you look down this roster, so much talent, right? Joey Hauser, Joshua Langford, Rocket Watts, who's been phenomenal at some points in the season but has really struggled as of late. Michigan State has a lot of talent. They're a well-coached team, but they got to get hot, they got to get consistent, and they need production from their main guys. You look on the other side of this matchup, Maryland, probably, pretty much already secured their spot into the March Madness. But I think, these are two bubble teams, and this matchup is big for whoever wins it. It pretty much seals the deal for whoever wins this matchup to make the actual tournament. We look at Maryland, led by their guard play, Eric Ayala, Aaron Wiggins, but they do have some bigger men as well. Also, Maryland, right, coming off their latest win against Michigan State in that head-to-head. Now, that was a little while ago. Michigan State, I think, is playing some better basketball now. They played phenomenal against my Michigan Wolverines in their last matchup. But I actually like Michigan State here to beat Maryland. Then we have Ohio State versus the winner of that previous matchup, which in my opinion is going to be Minnesota. So we got Minnesota versus Ohio State. And I've seen Ohio State play this year. They've struggled as of late, but this is a talented team. And one team that I'm probably going to end up picking to go deep in my actual March Madness bracket. You look at E.J. Liddell, their forward, Dwayne Washington Jr. This is a basketball team that shoots the three ball really well, and when they score, like I've said before, they score in chunks. Ohio State versus Michigan, that one game that I watched, was probably the best college basketball game that I have watched of the year. And I hate giving credit to Ohio State because obviously we're rivals with them. But this is a very talented team, and I think they're well coached. And I think when they're fully healthy and remotivated in these bigger games at the later part of the season, I think Ohio State is a legitimate threat. So obviously I'm picking Ohio State to beat Minnesota. Next up, we got the 7 Rutgers versus 10 Indiana matchup. We'll start with Indiana. Obviously, Indiana has Trace Jackson Davis. One of the best, I think, bigger men in the Big Ten Conference, and really in all of Division I basketball. He's phenomenal. 9 rebounds per game, 19.1 points per game. And I have watched a few Indiana games this year, and I think it depends on which Indiana team shows up. I've seen Indiana look like one of the best teams in the Big Ten Conference, and then I've also seen games where they look like the worst team in the Big Ten Conference. This is a team who gets to the free throw line, but isn't necessarily a great free throw shooting team by any means at only 67%. So there's a lot of things to like about Indiana. There's also a lot of things to not like about the Indiana Hoosiers. And then on the other side, you got Rutgers, a record of 14-10, 6th in the Big Ten Conference, or 7th in the Big Ten Conference, I think. Yep, 7th. Led by Ron Harper Jr. You got Miles Johnson as well, Jacob Young. This is a team who could score the basketball, 3 double-digit scorers, score over 70 points per game. Pretty solid defensively as well. This is a tough matchup to pick. This would probably be my, most 50-50 matchup in this round of the Big Ten Conference. If I had to pick right now, I'd probably lean Rutgers just because you don't know what you're getting with Indiana. So for the purpose of this video, we'll move Rutgers on, but don't be surprised if Indiana ends up taking it. And then we got Wisconsin versus who's going to be the winner of that Penn State game, so we'll take Penn State. You look at Wisconsin, they've struggled lately, but this is such a talented team with Demetric Trice, Micah Potter. I've watched Wisconsin countless times this year, probably like 7 of their games I've watched this year. And yeah, they struggle at some points because they get majority of their scoring from like 3 or 4 guys. But it's a well-coached team, a team who's got experience. Don't count Wisconsin out. So I would take Wisconsin to move on to that Iowa game after beating Penn State. Moving to that top of the bracket, we would be getting a third matchup of the season between Michigan and Michigan State. And boy, I would be excited for this one because we're coming off that loss for them. And from a purely college basketball standpoint, what just a phenomenal, gritty matchup this would be. Obviously, Michigan has dealt with Aaron Henry before in that first game of the season that they played against him. They shut him down. They shut Rocket Watts down. They played really well, especially in that second half of the game. You look at Michigan, and I think, you got a really well-coached team. You're talking about a team who's probably going to be a bit more motivated now that the games really do mean something because, at the end of the day, they had already clinched the number 1 seed in the Big Ten, so that one on Sunday meant something for Michigan in terms of holding their number 1 seed for March Madness, but in the real gist of things really was not a really meaningful game. But you look at Michigan and you're talking about some phenomenal play from guys like Franz Wagner, Isaiah Livers, Hunter Dickinson, who can lock up some of the best big men in the country and did that against Luka Garza when we saw him. So I would definitely take Michigan in that matchup. And then we would have an interesting one, Ohio State, Purdue. I like both of these two teams. You look at Purdue, Williams over there, who's their best player with 15.2 points per game, 8.8 rebounds per game. Eric Hunter, obviously, that weird matchup with Zach Edey at center, the 7-footer. It would be a very interesting matchup. I would definitely have my eyes on this one. This is an interesting one, though. Purdue has had a phenomenal season. They're ranked for a reason, finished 18-8 in the Big Ten for a reason. But here I would still take, I think, Ohio State with the upset. And then you would have Rutgers, Illinois, I guess. When Dosunmu is healthy, I think this is one of the top teams in the country. They showed it last week by beating Michigan without Dosunmu, and then Ohio State with Dosunmu. But you got Kofi Coburn over there, Frazier. This is a deep team. I like Illinois to move on as well. And then you got Wisconsin versus Iowa. I'll tell you something. Wisconsin hasn't been playing great basketball lately, but they played a very tight game against Iowa this past weekend. Obviously, Iowa's a deep team led by one of the best scorers in Division I basketball, in Luka Garza, but give me Wisconsin with the upset. So that brings us Michigan versus Ohio State. Michigan and Ohio State would both have been playing some not so great basketball, but then coming off some pretty quality wins. This was, again, the game of the year that I watched previously, and I think Michigan takes it again. Then we would have Illinois versus Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin, Nate Reavers, Demetric Trice is such a talented team, and I really do hope they end up, getting a favorable matchup in the actual March Madness tournament. And I think, with the win in this tournament, they're more than clinched already in the Big Ten, and I think that's definitely going to clinched a spot in the March Madness, and I think that's definitely going to happen. But you look at this Illinois team, and they're so phenomenal. The way that they played Michigan with no Dosunmu shows how deep they are. But you look at this roster, and it's really 2 superstars. So give me Illinois versus Michigan in the Big Ten Conference Championship game. And you know what? As much as I want to be biased and pick the Michigan Wolverines, Illinois gained more than just my respect when they beat Michigan while injured. I think they're the better team right now. I think they're more motivated. And I think with those 2 superstars right now, when Illinois is hot, they are really tough to beat. I'm curious to see the way that Michigan plays on Friday. And I think that'll, change my decisions on Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday. But as of now, I will take Illinois to win the Big Ten Conference Championship game. Anyways, guys, that's going to be all for today. If you guys did enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a thumbs up, subscribe to Touchdowns to Home Runs. We already have posted a ton of bracketologies coverage for the March Madness tournament. But if you don't want to miss that coverage throughout all of March and all of April as we close out these conference tournaments, move into Selection Sunday and the March Madness tournament, definitely make sure to hit that subscribe button and check out the rest of our videos on the channel. Anyways, guys, again, if you did make it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again next time.